Hey everyone, welcome back to the program. Now, just the other day I was thinking, it's pretty incredible that in the very same year the Beatles broke up, not only did they release their final album, Let It Be, but each Beatle had their own solo record, or two in the case of Ringo. And that got me wondering, what if they never broke up, but instead channeled all of that music into another Beatles album? What would that sound like? Well, in today's program, I'm going to be pulling songs from their various solo efforts to create what I think would make the Lost Beatles album of 1971. But before we dive in, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Otis. So when we talk about the Beatles, there are some holy grail collectibles out there, from Ringo's White Album serial number 1 to a sealed First State stereo butcher cover. However, these and other pieces of memorabilia come with an out-of-reach price tag. But what if there was a way that we, as like-minded collectors, could pool our money together and collectively own a unique item? Well, that's where Otis comes in. It's a new app that allows anyone to invest in alternative assets like art, sneakers, comics, and other high-end collectibles for as little as $25. And while they don't currently offer any Beatles memorabilia, they do have some very cool items, such as the first appearance of Wolverine, my favorite X-Men by the way, replica shoes for one of my favorite movies, Back to the Future Part 2, and the comic that started it all, the first issue of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a staple of my youth. What I really like is that they'll host pop-up events where you'll be able to view the investments in person at their New York City gallery. It's free to check out and there's no commitment. All you have to do to get started is download the app using the link in the description. Once there, you can get notified when these and other collectibles become available. Now, of course, I'm not the first one to do this. In fact, there's a very famous mix done by Ethan Hawke that compiles pretty much the whole solo career of all the Beatles. But we're not going to do that today. Today we're going to be very specific and really just focus in on the years 1970 and 1971. Now, a lot of lists that I've seen tend to focus on 1970, but if we consider that their trajectory of their last two albums, Abbey Road and Let It Be, were both a year apart, I have to assume that the next Beatle album, had they not broken up, would have come out in 1971. So what that does, it opens it up to songs that were written and recorded in 1971, and that would include albums such as Ram and Imagine. So this is very exciting. Plus, there's a couple other singles that we can throw in, and I just want to make one thing clear, is that this will be a single vinyl album. So I'm taking into account track length and how they will fit on each side of a record. So that's pretty exciting. I'm pretty much thinking of myself as a producer, as someone guiding the Beatles to create the next album after Let It Be. So yeah. All right, all that being said, let's get started with side 1, track 1, George Harrison's What Is Life from his 1970 opus, All Things Must Pass. I knew I needed a strong opener, and this song fits the bill. It's got a great groove that puts me in the right headspace for the rest of the songs. All right, moving on to track 2, we have McCartney's Monkberry Moon Delight from his album Ram. I love the driving beat and the minor chords used throughout this song. It's got such kind of a tribal feel about it. And honestly, it's a bit dark in terms of musicality and themes, and it makes me want to hear how the rest of the band would have played it. I think John really would have liked this song. And speaking of which, moving on to track 3, we have John Lennon's Instant Karma, We All Shine On. Oh my goodness. This was the first solo Beatles single to sell 1 million copies and gave Let It Be a run for its money on the US charts. I picked this one because it's one of John's best songs, and it just had the right feeling to follow up Paul's song. Up next, we have George's Not Guilty from the Beatles Anthology 3. Originally written in 1968 after their trip to India, the Beatles recorded it for the White Album, but it was one of the last songs to be cut in order to make the album fit on 2 records. Now, Harrison would go on to record his own version for his 1979 self-titled album, and most fans, that was the first time they heard that song. It wasn't until the 90s with the Anthology 3 release that we finally heard the Beatles version. Now, there is a longer version that was later released on the 50th anniversary edition of the White Album. Which one is better? I'll let you guys decide, but I picked the shorter version here so that it would fit on side 1 of my record. Rounding out side 1, we have the powerhouse Maybe I'm Amazed from Paul's debut solo album McCartney. Now, I wanted to close my side 1 with an uplifting song, but one that also made you want to flip the record over, and this one does it so very well. This was originally written in 1969 prior to their breakup, and it does have a very Beatles sound in my opinion, and unlike the bulk of his debut, this song was recorded at Studio 2 at Abbey Road with Paul playing all of the parts. So I have to think, being in that space, that's what gives it that Beatles sound. And also, this is just one of my favorite songs by Paul. I think it's in his top 5 of his solo career. All right, the opener of side 2 needed to be a strong single, so I picked It Don't Come Easy by Ringo Starr. You know, it really wouldn't be a Beatles album without at least one appearance by Ringo, but even though he released 2 albums in 1970 alone, both were cover albums, not an original tune among them. I was beginning to lose hope until I found this song, which was co-written by Ringo and George and released as a single in 1971. It's one of Ringo's best, and it hit the right note for side 2. Check out his live version performed with George on the Concert for Bangladesh album. Now for track 2, I wanted to slow things down a bit, but not too much, and so I picked John's Hold On from his solo debut album, Plastic Ono Band. From John's tremolo heavy guitar to the subtle drum work by Ringo, this is such a groovy song. The best part though has to be the random appearance of Cookie Monster. Okay, it's not really Cookie Monster, it's just John doing an impression of him, but I just love that pop culture reference. All right, moving right along, we have track 3 with Paul's Dear Boy. This piano-driven number has some great Beach Boys, God Only Knows backing vocals that just dance around Paul's slightly processed vocals. On an interesting side note, John thought this was about him, however, Paul said it was directed at his wife's ex-husband, as if to say, look at what you missed out on, in reference to Linda. Overall, this song adds some fantastic melodic tension for the middle of side 2. So after that beautiful, lush production, we stripped things down for track 4, John and Yoko's iconic Imagine from John's 1971 album of the same name. This went on to be his best-selling single of his entire solo career. Not to diminish the work of producer Phil Spector or arranger Torrey Zito, but the strings on here do make me wonder how they would sound if George Martin arranged them. Regardless, I love this song, and it's one of John's best, if not his most remembered song, and that's why I put it on my album. Okay, so after those last 2 songs, I knew I needed to lighten the mood a bit, and so here we have Paul's Another Day, from the soaring melody to the complex rhythm section, and some lovely harmonies. This to me is Paul in top form. It's poignant without being saccharine. So I chose a John song for track 6. This time it's a demo named Child of Nature that was released on the 50th anniversary edition of the White Album. This song would eventually morph into Jealous Guy off his Imagine record, and while I enjoy that version, I'm just not a fan of the way it sounds compared to the demo version. There's something about it that I just love. Maybe it's the fact that they were all playing together in George's house, and so it has some of that Beatles magic in it. Regardless, I love the melody of this song, and the way John sings it is just perfect. Finally, we have what is probably George's most remembered song of his entire solo career, My Sweet Lord, from his album All Things Must Pass. Originally written in December of 1969, George first recorded the song with Billy Preston on vocals, and it was done in a much more traditional gospel style. While that version isn't bad, it just doesn't capture the same uplifting spiritual feeling of George's version. Combine that with his brilliant slide guitar work and you have a wonderful song to close my record. Alright, so those are my picks of the Lost Beatles album of 1971, and I gotta say, I had fun going through all of their solo work and picking out my favorites and then whittling those down to a single vinyl album, which also meant I had to cut out some of my favorites due to track length or similarities to other songs that I had already picked. And of course, who knows how different all of these songs would have sounded if there was input from all the other members and George Martin. And one unexpected thing I came away with was a deeper understanding of the roles each Beatle played within the group. I mean, I guess I always knew this on a subconscious level, but it wasn't until I started listening to each Beatle on their own that it became abundantly clear. So this is how I break it down. John brought honesty and grit. Paul brought sparkling melody and hope. George brought spirit and deeper meaning, while Ringo was the glue that held them all together. Sort of, kept them grounded in a sense, which is interesting because I always used to write off Ringo as being replaceable, but now I realize he was just as important as the other three. And so now I really appreciate Ringo for all that he did. All right, everybody, that will do it for today. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to leave me a comment with your own lost album track list. Until then, I'm your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Hey everyone, thanks again for checking out my lost album playlist of 1971. If you want to see more Beatles content, I put a playlist right there, as well as a video that YouTube will choose for me.